Get out. My voice cut right through the party. The local food bloggers stopped filming, and my son-in-law, Mark, just froze. He'd been laughing a second before, giving a speech about his vision. "You have 48 hours to vacate my property," I said again. My hands weren't even shaking as I held the legal notice. "You can't," my daughter Chloe whispered, her face ghost white. We own this." I looked at the girl I had raised, who was standing next to a man who was a complete fraud. "No, darling, you don't. You signed an operations transfer, but you never read the fine print." But that explosion was just the final crack in a foundation that had been crumbling for years. To understand how I had to take back my life's work from my own daughter, we need to go back. It all started with a signature. 6 months ago, I sat in a conference room that smelled of old paper and new money, watching my daughter and her husband. Chloe was practically bouncing in her chair, so excited to play CEO. Her husband, Mark, was leaning back, feet crossed, like he already owned the world. He was a consultant, one of those slick, 30-something guys who'd read a book on disruption and now thought he was Steve Jobs. My lawyer, Mr. Harrison, a man I'd trusted for 20 years, slid the stack of documents across the mahogany table. "Now, Eleanor," he said, his eyes finding mine, "this is a comprehensive transfer of operations, but I want to draw everyone's attention to Article 4. Yeah, the legal junk," Mark said, grabbing a pen. "We've got it, man. Where do I sign?" I watched him. He didn't read a single page. He just scrawled his name on the signature lines, his hand moving fast. Chloe, bless her, tried to read the first page, but Mark just tapped her leg. "It's fine, babe. Let's go celebrate." They didn't see it. They didn't see the one document that mattered. The one I had Harrison draft, based on a clause I'd read about in a business journal. It was buried on page 84 of the addendum, the trademark and property licensing agreement. It was my idea, my insurance policy. In their minds, I was the retiring old woman, a sweet, flower-dusted mascot who was handing them my life's work for a pat on the head. They were so blinded by their greed, so high on their own arrogance, they never bothered to read the fine print. And in America, you are always responsible for the fine print. The ink wasn't even dry on the papers when the first insults began. I stopped by the bakery a week later. I wasn't used to my quiet, empty house yet. I missed the 4 a.m. It starts, the smell of yeast and cardamom, the first sleepy good morning to my bakers. The moment I walked in, I knew something was wrong. The smell. It wasn't my bakery. It didn't smell like warm bread and dark coffee. It smelled cold, like industrial cleaner and wet paint. Mark was in the back, directing 2 workmen. "What's going on?" I asked. "Oh, hey, Eleanor," he said, not even turning around. "Phase 1 of the rebrand, just updating the vibe." That's when I saw it. By the back door next to a bag of trash was a pile of my things, my framed Best of Austin awards, the beautiful hand-painted sign my late husband had made for me, my photographs with local chefs, the ones who had become my family. "Mark," I said, my voice shaking, What is this?" Chloe came out from the office, tapping on her phone. "Oh, hi, Mom. We're just clearing things out, going minimalist, you know." She gestured to my awards, the proof of 30 years of back-breaking work. "It's just clutter, Mom. Clutter. 30 years of my life, 30 years of 18-hour days, of missing holidays, of pouring every cent I had and every ounce of my soul into this place, was clutter." I didn't say anything. I just picked up the photo of my husband and me, dusted it off, and walked out. But it got worse. The clutter was just the beginning. The soul was next. A week later, I saw Mrs. Rodriguez, a customer who had been coming in every Tuesday for a decade. She looked confused. "Eleanor, honey," she said, "they're out of the rosemary and olive oil sourdough. The young man says it's gone." Mark overheard. He swooped in, all fake smiles. "Mrs. R, we've got something better for you. Our new optimized loaf. It's fantastic." He pointed to a row of pale, anemic-looking breads that looked like they'd come from a factory. "But the sourdough," she said. "Yeah, we had to cut that," Mark said, patting her on the shoulder. "It just wasn't cost-effective. Too much. Time, you know." Cost-effective? I thought back to 2005. I was in this very building, my hands raw and bleeding from kneading. I'd been trying to perfect that starter for 6 months. I'd mortgaged my house to keep the lights on, and on the 100th attempt, at 3 a.m., I pulled that first perfect loaf from the oven. The crust crackled. The steam smelled like heaven. I sat on the floor and cried. That was the bread that built this place. That was the bread that paid for Chloe's college education. And he'd cut it, because it wasn't cost-effective. Mark thought I was just a sad old woman, heartbroken over bread. But a sad old woman doesn't survive 30 years in the Austin food scene. A sad old woman doesn't build a beloved local brand from nothing. I retired, but I didn't stop working. I went to see Maria, my bookkeeper of 20 years, the only other person Mark had kept on, probably because he hadn't figured out how to do payroll yet. I found her in her tiny office, looking miserable. "Eleanor," she whispered, giving me a hug. "It's awful. He's a fool." "I know," I said, and then I put on the best worried old woman performance of my life. I let my hands tremble a little. "Maria, I'm so worried. I put my whole life into this, with all these new systems. I'm just afraid something will get lost. Could you, just for my peace of mind, could you keep running the original books, the old way, just as a backup, so I know the numbers are safe?" Maria's eyes hardened. She knew exactly what I was asking. "They're fools," she said again, "and he's already cooking the books, I'm sure of it, trying to hide his losses. Don't you worry, Eleanor. I'll keep a perfect backup." It wasn't for my peace of mind. It was for my legal case. The final piece of my puzzle, well, it landed right in my shopping cart. It was a Saturday. I was at Costco. You know the scene, pure chaos, giant flatbed carts, and the smell of hot dogs. I was grabbing my usual case of paper towels when I turned the corner by the freezers. And I froze. There they were, Chloe and Mark. They had one of those giant flatbeds, and it was piled high with boxes, giant industrial boxes of frozen, pre-made pastry sheets. The cheapest, gummiest, hydrogenated oil-filled crap you can buy. I just stared. My bakery, the Gilded Oven, was famous for its all-butter, hand-laminated croissants. People drove from Dallas for them. And these two frauds, were passing off factory garbage as my own. I walked right up to them. My cartwheel squeaked. "You're not using these." Chloe turned bright red. Mark looked annoyed. "God, Mom, stop it," Chloe hissed, looking around to see if anyone was watching. "You're embarrassing us. It's just business." Embarrassing them? I just stood there in the middle of the freezer aisle, my face burning. I was the fool. I had been grieving my bakery, but it was already dead. They were just living in the corpse. That was the moment the last little bit of mother in me died, and the owner took over. I let them go on for 2 more months. I let them sink. I let them run the optimized business. I watched from afar as the bad reviews started trickling in on Yelp. Pale bread, tastes frozen. What happened to this place? And then I got the invitation. An email from a PR firm. "You're invited to the launch of Ovenly, Austin's hottest new artisanal experience." They were erasing my name. The Gilded Oven was gone. They were hosting a party for food bloggers and influencers, trying to spin their fraud into a new brand. I sat in my quiet house. I wasn't angry. I was calm. I had the backup books from Maria, showing how they were mismanaging funds. I had the photos I discreetly snapped at Costco. And I had the contract they never read. I put on my best dress. I smoothed my hair. I grabbed the folder from my desk, the one Mr. Harrison had prepared for me weeks ago. It was time to go to the party. The ink on the papers was barely dry. I'd given myself a week of retirement. I tried to enjoy it. I really did. I slept past 4 a.m. for the first time in 30 years. I sat in my quiet house, trying to read a novel, but the silence was deafening. My hands, so used to the constant motion of kneading dough and boxing pastries, felt heavy and useless in my lap. My bakery wasn't just a job, it was the rhythm of my life. It was the smell of yeast and cardamom in the morning, the hum of the big ovens, the first sleepy good morning to my bakers. It was my home, and I missed it. I told myself I was being silly. This was the next chapter. This was what you were supposed to do, work your fingers to the bone, build something from nothing, and pass it on to your kids. I had to trust them. I had to let go. So, on a Tuesday, I decided to visit. Not as the old boss, but as mom. I even baked a batch of my lemon ricotta muffins, the ones Chloe used to beg for when she was little. I put them in my nicest basket, a peace offering, a congratulations. I parked in my old spot, but the moment I stepped out of the car, I knew something was wrong. The smell. It was gone. The warm, buttery, sugary air that used to hug you 3 blocks away was gone. I got closer to the door, and all I could smell was cold. A sharp, chemical smell, like industrial cleaner and wet paint. I pushed open the door. The little bell, the one my husband had hung, didn't jingle. They'd taken it down. The bakery was gray. My warm, buttery yellow walls, the color of a perfect pie crust, were gone. They were a flat, lifeless, minimalist gray. The cozy wooden tables were replaced with cold, sterile-looking metal stools. It looked less like a neighborhood bakery and more like a high-end dentist's office. Mark was in the back, on his phone, pacing. He was wearing one of those obnoxious Bluetooth earpieces. No, the margins are the point, he was saying. We're not selling charm, we're selling a scalable product. He saw me and just gave a little 1-second finger wave, then turned his back. And that's when I saw it. Next to the back door, piled high, was a big black industrial trash bag. It was overflowing, and sticking out of the top, like a broken bone, was the corner of a wooden frame. I felt my stomach go cold. I walked closer. It wasn't just a frame. It was my first Best of Austin award from 1998. Underneath it was a stack of my other awards. My framed photos with local chefs, the ones who had become my family. My newspaper clippings. Mark, I said. My voice was small. He ignored me, still talking. Look, just optimize the supply chain, I don't care how. I set my basket of muffins on a cold metal counter. I reached toward the trash bag, my hand trembling. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I pulled back a layer of old coffee cups and drywall scraps. And I saw it. My sign. The sign my late husband, David, had made for me when I first opened. It was hand-carved from a piece of reclaimed oak. He'd spent a month sanding it. The gilded oven. He'd painted in beautiful, deep blue letters with little gold flourishes he'd done with a tiny brush. I remembered the night he hung it. We'd stood on the sidewalk, arms around each other, sharing a bottle of cheap champagne. To our gilded cage, Ellie, he'd joked. May it always be full. And now... It was in the trash. The corner of it was cracked, splintered. What is this? I whispered. Chloe came out from the office, tapping on her phone. She looked stressed. Oh, hi, Mom. I just pointed. That. I couldn't get the words out. Your father's sign. It's in the trash. Chloe finally looked up. She saw the bag. She saw my face, and she had the grace to look. Annoyed. Oh, that, she said, waving her hand. We're just clearing things out. Going minimalist, you know, rebranding. Rebranding, I repeated. With my awards? With your father's sign. Mom, she sighed, and her voice had that sharp, impatient edge. It's just clutter. It's all so old-fashioned. Clutter. The word hung in the air, heavier than the smell of paint. My husband's hands, sanding that wood. 30 years of my life. 30 years of 18-hour days, of missing holidays, of pouring every cent I had and every ounce of my soul into this place, was clutter. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there. I calmly walked over to the trash bag. Whoa, Eleanor, don't get your hands dirty, Mark said, finally off his call. The cleaning crew will get that. I didn't listen. I reached deep into that filthy bag, past his half-eaten bagel and wet paper towels, and I pulled out the sign. It was heavier than I remembered. A piece of the gold flourish was gone, and the crack was worse than I thought. I held it. I looked at Chloe. You remember him making this, don't you? She flinched. She looked down. Mom, don't. Please don't be sentimental. Mark's right. We're trying to build a brand. We have to be professional. I see, I said. I tucked the broken sign under my arm. Professional. I turned and walked out. I left the basket of muffins on the counter. I didn't look back. I got to my car. I sat in the driver's seat. I placed the broken piece of my husband's love on the passenger seat, and then just one tear. A single, hot, angry tear. This wasn't a rebranding, this was an erasure. They weren't just taking over a business, they were trying to pretend I had never existed. I drove home. I put the sign on my kitchen table, and I pulled out my copy of the transfer agreement. I flipped through the junk Mark hadn't bothered to read, past the pages and pages of legal boilerplate, until I found it. Article 4. Trademark and Property Licensing Agreement. I ran my finger over the words. This wasn't just a contract anymore. It was a promise to my husband. It was a promise to myself. And it was the only weapon I had left. That broken piece of my husband's love sat on my kitchen table for 3 days. I had my wood glue, my tiny clamps. I tried to fit the splintered oak back together, but the crack was deep, and a piece of the gilded flourish was just gone. I held that splintered wood in my hands and I felt cold. This was more than a sign. It was a promise. It was 40 years of my life, and they had tossed it in a trash bag with old coffee cups and drywall scraps. I'd look from the broken sign on my table to the thick, bound contract sitting on my counter. My weapon. But it was a weapon I never wanted to use. It was meant to be a shield, a safety net, the kind of thing you have in the back of a closet and pray you never need, like a fire extinguisher. But sitting there, trying to glue my life back together, I realized they weren't just ignorant, they were arrogant. And arrogance, I've learned, is a weed. If you let it go, it takes the whole garden. I was a fool, I know. I thought, maybe they just don't understand. Maybe if I explained why things mattered, why the history was the whole point, they'd get it. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to teach. I was still Mom, after all. I went back a week later. The gray paint had settled in, and the walls felt even colder. The new, sterile espresso machine, which looked like it belonged on a spaceship, was hissing and screaming. It sounded angry. Mark was at one of the new metal stools, his back to the door, a laptop open, typing so hard I could hear the clack, clack, clack from the entrance. He was so focused on his margins he didn't even notice me come in. I didn't go to him. I went to the back, to the walk-in proofer, to the corner where Goldie was supposed to be. Goldie was my sourdough starter. She was my secret, my masterpiece. I'd started her 22 years ago, cultivating wild yeast from a handful of grapes in my own backyard. She was a living thing, a bubbling, breathing, complex organism that smelled like sweet beer and ripe fruit. She was temperamental, she was high maintenance, and she was the soul of the gilded oven. The proofer was empty. The big stainless steel bowl was gone. The heat was off. The air was cold. I felt a prickle of panic. "Mark," I called out. "Mark, where's Goldie? Where's the starter?" I walked out front. He was still typing. "Mark." Before he could answer, the door opened, and Mrs. Rodriguez, a customer who had been coming in every Tuesday and Friday for a decade, walked in. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Eleanor, honey, I was hoping I'd catch you." Then she looked around, and her face fell. "Oh, it's different." "It is, Maria," I said, forcing a smile. "What can I get for you?" "Well, I came for my usual, the rosemary and olive oil sourdough," the young man you had last week said. He said it was gone. Right on cue, Mark shot up from his stool. He'd found his customer service voice. "Mrs. R, welcome to the new Ovenly." Mrs. Rodriguez looked at him, confused. "Ovenly, the new brand. Don't worry, we've got something better for you." He bounded behind the counter and pointed to a rack by the register. It was filled with pale, identical, anemic-looking loaves in shiny plastic bags. "Our new optimized loaf. It's fantastic. We've streamlined the entire process. 90-minute proof to package." I remembered the night Goldie was born. It wasn't 90 minutes. It was 6 months. I'd been trying to perfect the starter. I was exhausted. I'd been sleeping on a bag of flour in the back, my hands raw and cracked from kneading. I'd mortgaged our house to keep the lights on, and I was failing. David, my husband, found me at 3 a.m., crying into a bowl of gray, lifeless paste. "Ellie, come to bed," he'd pleaded. "It's just bread." "It's not just bread," I'd yelled. It's everything." He sighed. He didn't leave. He sat on the floor next to me. He put his arm around me, and we just watched the bowl. as if our combined will could make it live. An hour later, I saw it. A bubble. And then another. It was rising. It smelled like heaven. I baked the first loaf as the sun came up. The crust crackled as it cooled. It sang. I sat on that floor, and I cried again, but this time, David was crying too. That was the bread. The bread that built this place. The bread that paid for Chloe's college education. And now, Mark was pointing to his 90-minute optimized loaf. Mrs. Rodriguez looked at the sad, pale bread. Oh, but the sourdough. It was so chewy. And the crust. Mark laughed. A short, sharp, ha, that had no humor in it. Yeah, that's what we're fixing. That chew is just wasted time. It's not cost-effective. Too much handling, too much. Babysitting the dough, the optimized loaf has a 40% better margin. Mrs. Rodriguez, bless her, just looked at him. Babysitting is what makes it good, young man. I finally found my voice. It was a whisper. Mark, I said, what did you do with my starter? What did you do with Goldie? He finally turned to look at me, annoyed by the interruption. Oh, that. I tossed it. First day. You what? Yeah, I tossed it, he said, like he was talking about an old newspaper. It was. Gross, Eleanor. A bucket of old bubbly goo. It smelled weird. Frankly, it was a health code violation waiting to happen. We're running a clean, modern facility now. No room for that. He'd tossed it. He hadn't just thrown out a recipe. He'd thrown out my husband. He'd thrown out 3 a.m., tears, and 4 a.m., triumphs. He'd thrown out the soul of the business. It's not cost-effective, I repeated. The words felt like poison in my mouth. Exactly, he said, suddenly happy that I was getting it. This is a business, Eleanor. It's about the margins, not the memories. You'll see. The profits will be through the roof. Mrs. Rodriguez looked at me, her eyes full of pity. Then she looked at Mark, her eyes full of something else. You know what, dear, she said, patting my arm. This, ovenly, it's not for me. I think I'll just go to the farmer's market next door. She walked out. The bell, oh, wait, there was no bell. She just left. Mark scoffed. See, not our target demographic. She's stuck in the past. I looked at the man my daughter had married. This consultant. This disruptor. He was nothing but a vandal in a $300 shirt. He hadn't just erased my awards. He hadn't just broken my husband's sign. He'd killed the gilded oven. He just hadn't told the customers yet. I turned and walked out. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. He had just confirmed everything I was afraid of. He had just handed me the one thing I didn't have before. Clarity. I went home, sat at my kitchen table, and picked up the phone. Mr. Harrison, I said, my voice steady and clear. It's Eleanor. No, I'm fine. I just have a few questions about Article 4. I need to understand it perfectly. I hung up the phone with Mr. Harrison, my hand steady. Perfectly. I had told him, and I meant it. The weapon wasn't just a fire extinguisher anymore. It was a loaded gun. The contract was clear. I had retained ownership of the trademark and the building. They were licensing it from me, a license that came with conditions. They had to maintain the quality and reputation of the Gilded Oven brand, and Mark had just tossed the soul of that brand into a dumpster. But I knew men like Mark. He wasn't just arrogant. He was a shark. He'd be moving money, cooking the books, trying to hide the fact that his optimized loaf was almost certainly bombing. His ego wouldn't let him admit that old-fashioned actually worked. If he was losing money, and I knew he had to be, the bad Yelp reviews were already popping up like weeds. He'd be lying about it. My word against his? That was messy. I needed proof. I needed numbers. I needed Maria. Maria Sanchez had been my bookkeeper for 22 years. She was a quiet, no-nonsense woman who could make an Excel spreadsheet sing. She was old school. She knew every penny that came in and every penny that went out. Mark had kept her on, I assumed, because he was too lazy or too stupid to figure out the payroll system himself. But I couldn't just walk in. The locks had been changed. I still had a key to the back service door, a key they didn't know about. I waited until 5:30 p.m. I knew Mark and Chloe would be gone. They were CEOs now, and CEOs didn't stick around to mop the floors or cash out the register. That was for staff. I let myself in the back door, the familiar snick of the lock feeling strange, illicit. The bakery was dark, the gray walls looking almost purple in the twilight. It was silent, all the hissing machines finally off. I crept down the hall to the tiny office they'd shoved Maria into, the one that used to be a mop closet. She was still there, a little desk lamp cutting a single circle of light in the dark. Her old, heavy adding machine, the one she loved, was unplugged on a shelf. In its place was a shiny new tablet that she was glaring at. "Maria," I whispered. She jumped, her hand flying to her chest. "Eleanor, Dios mío, you scared me half to death. What are you doing here, if he finds you?" "He's gone," I said, slipping inside and closing the door. "They both are." She slumped in her chair, and the hard, professional mask she wore melted away. "It's awful, Eleanor. Just awful. He talks to me like I'm an idiot, like I don't know how to count. This new system," she poked the tablet, "it's garbage. It's all designed to hide things." I looked at this woman, this loyal friend who had helped me file my late husband's taxes, who had held my hand when I took out the second mortgage. And then I put on the best performance of my life. I let my shoulders slump. I wrung my hands. I let my voice get a little frail, a little old. "Oh, Maria," I sighed. "I'm just so worried. I don't sleep. I put my whole life into this place. And now, all these new systems, this Ovenly." I said the name like it tasted bad. "I'm just an old woman, I know. I don't understand margins and optimization. I don't trust it." Maria's eyes softened. "I don't trust him," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He's a fool. And he's in trouble." "Is he?" I asked, all wide-eyed innocence. "The numbers for that pale bread," she spat. "They're terrible. No one is buying it. Our regulars are gone. The food cost for the new coffee is through the roof. He's bleeding money, Eleanor, and I think he's moving it around to cover it up." This was it. "Oh, Maria," I said, placing my hand on her arm. "That's what I was afraid of. Please, just for my peace of mind, I'm not asking you to do anything wrong. But could you just keep running the original books? The old way." I held my breath. "You know, with the real numbers, the ones from the register, not this system. Just as a backup. So I know the truth, so I can sleep at night." Maria looked at me. She wasn't looking at a frail old woman anymore. She was looking at her old boss. She saw the steel I was trying to hide, and a slow, quiet smile spread across her face. "He's a fool," she said again. "He never even asked me for the real administrator passwords to the original accounts. He just set up his own new ones." She tapped her old, unplugged adding machine. This is just for show now. I do all the real work at home, at night, on my own laptop." She reached out and squeezed my hand. "Peace of mind, Eleanor. Of course. I've been keeping a backup since the day he threw out your starter." I felt a rush of, not just relief, it was power. It was the feeling of a partner. "Thank you, Maria," I whispered. "You're a good friend." "No," she said, her eyes hard. "I'm a good bookkeeper, and he's a bad businessman. Go home, Eleanor. I'll email you a copy of the real spreadsheets tonight, the ones showing the real losses." I slipped out the back door, into the cool night air. The streetlights buzzed. I wasn't a worried old woman anymore. I wasn't just Mom. I was a strategist. And I had just recruited my first soldier. I wasn't just gathering rope anymore. Maria was handing me a noose. Maria was as good as her word. I didn't have a strategist, I had a spy. And she was a very good one. Every Tuesday and Friday, like clockwork, a new email would appear in my inbox. The subject line was always the same. Gardening updates. There were never any words in the email, just a single, password-protected file. I'd sit at my kitchen table, the one where I used to roll out 40 pounds of brioche dough, the one that still had a fine, permanent dusting of flour in its cracks, and I'd open the spreadsheets. It was worse than I thought. Maria was right. He was bleeding money. The optimized loaf was a catastrophic failure. The numbers didn't lie. Sales were down 60%. 60. The bad Yelp reviews had become a flood. Tastes like a sponge. What happened to this place? Used to be a 5-star, now it's a 1-star. So sad. He was trying to cover it. He was spending a fortune on marketing, thousands on Facebook ads, thousands on consultants. Consultants who, I noticed, had the same last name as his college roommate. He was buying a new, screaming espresso machine every other week, trying to find a silver bullet. But the worst part, the part that made my hands shake, was the accounts payable tab. He wasn't paying my vendors. Frank, from the dairy, who had given me a line of credit when I had nothing but a handshake. The almond farmer in California who I'd worked with for 20 years, he was 90 days past due to everyone. He wasn't just running my business into the ground, he was setting my reputation on fire. I couldn't let that happen. I'd sit at that table, my heart a cold stone in my chest, and I'd pay them, from my own retirement account, the money I'd set aside. I'd call Frank. "Hi, Frank, it's Eleanor. Yes, I'm enjoying retirement, thank you. Listen, I heard there was an accounting error with your last few invoices. Mark's still learning the ropes, you know. And I'd wire him the money. I'd wire all of them the money. Just an accounting error," I'd say, over and over. I was cleaning up their mess. I was protecting the gilded oven name, the name my husband carved, the name I had built. I was so busy being mom, I didn't realize I was also being an idiot. I was enabling them. I was paying for the rope they were using to hang me. I needed to. I don't know. Get out. The house was too quiet. It was just me and the spreadsheets, and the silence was loud. It was a Saturday. The kind of bright, hot, blinding Austin day that makes the air shimmer over the pavement. I needed noise. I needed normal. And what's more painfully, chaotically normal than a Saturday at Costco? I walked in, and the sensory overload was almost a relief. The smell of hot dogs and new tires, the roar of 100 conversations, the high-pitched screech of 1,000 wobbly cartwheels, people everywhere, grabbing giant tubs of pretzels, 48 packs of toilet paper. It was the American dream, in bulk. I grabbed a cart. I was just a normal person, buying normal things. I felt invisible, and for a little while, it felt good. I was in the back, near the giant walk-in freezers. The air was blessedly cold, a welcome shock from the Texas heat. I was looking at the frozen salmon, thinking about making dinner. For one, I turned the corner, pushing my half-empty cart. My wheels squeaked, and I froze. It wasn't them, not at first. It was the cart, a giant, industrial flatbed cart, the kind they use to move patio furniture, and it was piled high. Not with patio furniture, with boxes, dozens of them, white and blue boxes. I knew that logo. I'd seen it in the back of food service magazines, the ones I always threw away. Durobake. It was garbage. It was the cheapest, gummiest, most chemically filled, hydrogenated oil-based frozen pastry dough on the market. It was the kind of stuff you'd use if you actively hated your customers. It was the kind of stuff that would make a real baker's soul just die. Who, I thought, would ever? And then I saw them. Mark was on his phone, laughing, his back to me. He was wearing an Ovenly polo shirt, a logo shirt. He was a walking, talking billboard for his own fraud. And Chloe, my daughter, she was leaning against the cart, scrolling through her phone, looking bored. She looked like a sulky teenager being dragged on an errand. Mark hung up. He grabbed another 30-pound case of frozen croissant sheets and threw it onto the flatbed. It landed with a dull, frozen thud. My cartwheel squeaked. Squeak! I just stood there. In the middle of the freezer aisle, my face was burning, but the air was 10 degrees. I felt hot and cold, all at once. My feet moved before my brain did. I was walking toward them. "You're not." My voice was a croak. I cleared my throat. "You're not using these." Mark whipped around, his face. It wasn't guilt. It was annoyance, like I was a fly, a gnat. "Chloe. Oh, Chloe." She dropped her phone. It clattered on the concrete. She turned a color I'd never seen before. It wasn't a blush. It was a bright, painful, splotchy red. She was ashamed. Not ashamed of what she was doing. Ashamed of being caught. "Mom, she hissed. She didn't say, "Hi." She didn't say, "What's up?" She said, "What are you doing here?" "What am I?" "I'm shopping, Chloe. The real question is, what are you doing?" I pointed at the mountain of frozen dough. My hand was shaking now. My name is still on that sign. People are coming in, thinking they're buying my croissants. "Oh God," Mark said, rolling his eyes. He put his hand on his hip, like a suburban dad. "Eleanor, seriously? This is a supply chain solution. It's smart. We're cutting our prep time by 90%. The customers can't even tell the difference." "I can tell the difference," I said. My voice was low, but it cut through the hum of the freezers. People in the aisle were starting to look. A woman with a cart full of frozen pizzas stopped. You're a fraud, Mark," I said. And that's when Chloe exploded. "Stop it." Her voice was a shriek. It was so loud, the man loading pizzas flinched. "Mom, stop it. You're embarrassing us." "Embarrassing you?" I looked at my daughter, the little girl I'd taught to laminate dough by hand on a marble slab. The girl who used to beg to help me with the all-butter 27-layer 3-day Kuinamans. "You're buying factory garbage. And I'm embarrassing you." "Yes," she said, her eyes wild. "Yes, you are. It's just business. It's not this sacred, sainted thing you pretend it is. It's just a shop. And you're here, in Costco, making a scene. Just go home, Mom. Just go home." "Just go home, Mom." Mark put his arm around her. All protective husband. "Yeah, Eleanor," he said, his voice full of fake pity. "Go home. We've got this." He turned his back on me. He turned his back on me. He picked up another box of frozen dough. I stood there. For a full minute, I just stood. I watched them check their list. I watched them push their wobbly cart, piled high with lies, toward the checkout. The woman with the pizzas looked at me. "Teens," she said, shaking her head. "They'll be the death of you." "No," I said, my voice empty. "Just business." I left my cart. I left the paper towels. I left the salmon. I walked out of the store, past the lines, past the man checking receipts. I didn't stop. I got to my car. The sun was so bright, I was blinded. I sat in the driver's seat, the car and oven. "It's just business. You're embarrassing us. Just go home, Mom." I had been Mom for 30 years. I had been Mom when I co-signed the loan for her first car. I had been Mom when I paid for her college. I had been Mom when I handed her my life's work. And I was Mom when I paid my own vendors from my retirement savings so her new fraudulent business wouldn't ruin my good name. I sat in that car, sweating, and I made a decision. Mom was done. Mom was retired. It was time for Eleanor to go to work. The first thing Eleanor did was stop cleaning up the mess. I stopped paying my vendors. I let the accounting errors pile up. It was hard. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every instinct in me, every mom instinct, screamed to protect the business, to protect the name. Frank, my dairy guy, called me, and he wasn't happy. "Eleanor, I don't know what's going on," he said, his voice tight. "But this new guy of yours, he's 90 days past due. I'm gonna have to cut you off." "I know, Frank," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "He's not my guy, and you do what you have to do. Send me the final invoice, all of it, personally." I did that, one by one, with every single person I had worked with for 30 years. I paid them, personally, from my retirement account, and in return, I got what I needed. Affidavits. Signed statements that the Gilded Oven under Mark's management was in default. He wasn't just in breach of contract with me, he was in breach of contract with everyone. All the while, Maria's gardening updates kept coming. The spreadsheets weren't just a fire, they were a nuclear meltdown. The optimized loaf was a catastrophic failure. The new screaming espresso machine had broken down. Twice. The bad Yelp reviews were now a raging torrent. Mark's solution? The one I'd seen him loading up at Costco? He doubled down. He was now passing off factory-made, frozen dough pastries as artisanal. And he was spending, He was spending thousands on Facebook ads that didn't work, thousands on a PR firm to manage the bad reviews. He'd consulted with his college roommate to the tune of $10,000. He was hemorrhaging money, my money, the business's goodwill in a desperate, arrogant attempt to prove that he was a genius. The spreadsheets Maria sent weren't just spreadsheets anymore. They were evidence. Exhibit A. They were the proof that he had violated Article 4 of our agreement to maintain the quality and reputation of the brand. He hadn't just failed to maintain the reputation. He'd set it on fire and was throwing gasoline on the embers. I had enough. I had the affidavits from my vendors. I had the spreadsheets from Maria. I had my copy of the contract. I could have called Mr. Harrison. I could have just ended it. And then the final insult arrived. It came as an email. A glossy, obnoxious, animated Evite. "You're invited," it flashed in sterile gray letters, "to the launch of Ovenly." Ovenly. It was an invitation to the execution of my life's work. There was a photo, a professionally taken shot of Mark and Chloe. They were in my bakery standing in front of my ovens. Mark had on a tight black polo shirt and was smirking, arms crossed. Chloe. She was standing just behind him, her hand on his arm, smiling a bright, brittle, empty smile. They were visionaries. "Join us." The invitation read, "As we celebrate Austin's hottest new artisanal experience. Cocktails, hors d'oeuvres, and a live DJ. 8 p.m. till late." I got a text from Maria 2 hours later. Subject: "Look what they did." There was one photo attached. It was the sign, my husband's sign. The gilded oven, carved in oak. But I could barely see it. They had hung a cheap, plastic vinyl banner right over it. It was held up with zip ties. The new, stupid, lowercase logo, Ovenly, was stretched across it. They hadn't just erased me. They had covered me, blindfolded my husband's memory with cheap plastic. I looked at the photo of that sign. I looked at the email invitation, with its picture of them, smirking. I looked at the spreadsheet from Maria, the one that showed a negative balance of over $100,000. And I knew. I knew what this party was. This wasn't a celebration. It was a brag. It was Mark's victory lap. He was going to stand up in front of a room full of food bloggers and influencers, people who didn't know the difference between hand-laminated butter and Costco's frozen crap, and he was going to take a bow. He was going to give a speech. I could hear it in my head. He'd thank his team. He'd talk about his vision. He'd thank his wife Chloe for supporting him as he dragged this place into the 21st century. Dragged. Like it was a corpse. Like he was the hero for giving it new life when he was the one who had killed it. I sat there. I wasn't, Mom. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry. I was cold. I was calm. I was Eleanor. I didn't RSVP. I picked up the phone. "Mr. Harrison," I said, "it's Eleanor. I need you to print 2 documents for me. First, the formal notice of breach of contract, as we discussed. And second, the eviction notice. 48 hours, I said. "Yes, that's legal. It's in the addendum they didn't read. I'll be there in an hour to pick them up." I hung up. I went to my closet. I pulled out my board meeting dress, a simple navy blue sheath, the one I wore when I meant business. The one I wore when I'd negotiated my first lease, 30 years ago. I put on my sensible heels. I put my hair up in a tight, clean twist. I did my makeup. I wasn't a frail old woman. I wasn't clutter. I was the owner. I drove to Mr. Harrison's office. I took the folder from him. The papers inside felt heavy. They felt real. Then I drove to the bakery. It was 8:30 p.m. The party was in full swing. I could hear the thump, thump, thump of a bass line from the street. The gray walls were lit up with purple lights. I saw the silhouettes of all the influencers, their phones in the air, recording everything. I wasn't on the list. I didn't need to be. I walked up to the front door, the one that used to have my husband's bell. I took a deep breath. I pushed it open, and I walked in. The music hit me first. It wasn't music. Not really. It was a thump, thump, thump that I felt in my teeth. It was the sound of a headache. The bakery was dark, lit only by obnoxious purple spotlights that made everything look bruised. And the smell, my God, the smell. It wasn't the warm, buttery cardamom and coffee scent of my life. It was sweat and cheap perfume. And, oh, yes, the unmistakable oily scent of frozen pastries being warmed up in the back. They were serving the Costco crap. The room was packed, wall to wall, with people who were not my customers. These weren't families buying their Saturday morning bread. These were children. 20-somethings in expensive ripped jeans, holding champagne flutes, and their phones. Every single one of them had a phone in the air. They weren't talking to each other. They were filming. A young woman with hair the color of a pink highlighter nearly backed into me. She was trying to get a selfie with a tray of what used to be my signature mini quiches. But they were pale. They were soggy. They were the frozen ones. I just stood by the door. In my navy blue dress and my sensible heels, I was a ghost. A piece of clutter from a life they didn't know existed. I was invisible, and that was fine, because they were all looking at him. Mark. He was at the front, standing on a makeshift stage right in front of my ovens. He had a microphone. He was wearing a tight black polo shirt with the stupid lowercase Ovenly logo on it. He was smirking. And Chloe, my daughter, she was standing next to him, just a half step behind. She was wearing a silver dress that looked like tinfoil, and her smile was stretched so tight I thought it might crack. She looked brittle. Then, she saw me. I watched her face. Her smile didn't just flicker, it died. For one tiny, agonizing second, I saw panic, fear. And then, she looked away. She turned her head, just slightly, and looked back at Mark. She had made her choice. The music faded, and Mark tapped the microphone. Thank you. Welcome to Ovenly." A few people clapped. Most just kept filming. "It's incredible," he said, his voice booming, full of that slick, consultant speak. "It's incredible what you can do when you have a real vision, when you're not afraid to disrupt." My hands, which had been hanging at my sides, slowly clenched into fists. "Let's be honest," he continued, with a knowing, arrogant chuckle. "We inherited a charming but outdated concept, a hobby." There it was, that word, hobby. We had to drag this place, kicking and screaming, into the 21st century. We had to optimize, we had to streamline, we had to make the tough calls. The tough call to throw out my two-year-old starter, the streamlining of buying frozen garbage from Costco. But I couldn't have done it without my amazing wife, my partner, Chloe. He pulled her in, and he kissed her. The crowd awed. Chloe's eyes were closed, but her smile was. It was just a row of teeth. She supported me every step of the way, as I, made the tough decisions. To Ovenly. He raised his glass. The crowd raised their glasses. The thump-thump of the music was gone. The room was perfectly, totally silent. And into that silence, my heels went click, click, click on the cold gray tile. I didn't walk fast. I walked slow. I walked right through the middle of the crowd. The sea of phones parted for me. Mark's glass was still in the air. He hadn't seen me. He was waiting for the cheer. A wonderful speech, Mark. My voice wasn't loud, but it was the only sound in the room. He flinched. He lowered his glass. His smirk dissolved into confusion, annoyance. "Eleanor, I didn't see you. Glad you could make it. We're just wrapping up the toast." He was dismissing me. The old woman. The clutter. "No," I said. My voice was clear. It didn't tremble. "I'm not here for the toast." Chloe took a half step toward me, her hand out. "Mom, don't. Please, not here." "Oh, especially here," I said, my gaze sweeping across the room, at every single phone, all of them now pointed directly at me. "All these witnesses, it's perfect." I was in front of him now. I held up the simple, manila folder. "What is that?" Mark said. Your scrapbook." He was trying to get a laugh. "This," I said, "is your homework, Mark, the homework you didn't do." I opened it. "You're right about one thing," I said, my voice conversational. "You did sign papers. You signed an operations transfer." I pulled out the first document. "But you never read the fine print. You never read the trademark and property licensing agreement." Mark's face. It was a picture. The arrogance was gone. It was just blank. The What? The contract. The one you signed. The one that says you are licensing the brand The Gilded Oven from me for a monthly fee. I let that hang in the air. A fee, I might add, that you are 30 days past due on. You could hear a pin drop. The pink-haired girl in the front row was riveted. Her phone was steady as a rock. Mark sputtered. He looked at Chloe, then back at me. A fee? That's ridiculous. So what? We'll pay your stupid fee! And we're not the Gilded Oven anymore. We're Ovenly. Ah, I said. I pulled out the second paper. That's the other problem. This same agreement. It has clauses. Article 4, to be precise. It stipulates that the licensee, that's you, must, and I quote, maintain the quality and reputation of the brand. I took a step closer. And you haven't. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't emotional. I was a bookkeeper. I was just reading the ledger. You threw out my two-year-old sourdough starter. You tossed it. You're using cheap, frozen, factory-made dough and passing it off as artisanal. I pointed to the tray of soggy quiches. The pink-haired girl actually zoomed in on the tray. And you haven't paid your vendors, my vendors. Frank at the dairy? He's 90 days past due. I have the affidavits. I looked him right in the eye. You haven't maintained the brand, Mark. You have destroyed it. You have violated every term of our agreement. He was pale now, ghost white. He was looking at Chloe, but she was just staring at the folder. This is a trick, he stammered. This isn't legal. We'll sue you. No, I said, my voice soft. It's a contract, and by breaching that contract, you have voided the entire agreement. Chloe! She finally spoke. Her voice was a tiny little girl whisper, the whisper of the girl who used to be ashamed of me at Costco. Mom, what does that mean? I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, brittle, broken daughter. It means, darling, I said, and I pulled the last document from the folder. It means this whole party is over. Mark's laugh was a short, ugly bark. Over? The party's over. He was playing to the crowd, trying to paint me as a crazy old woman. What are you going to do, Eleanor? Sue us? You gonna take us to court over a name? He took a step toward me, trying to use his height, trying to be intimidating. You're just a bitter old woman, making a scene because… Mr. Jensen, a voice cut through the room, sharp and clear. It was the young woman in the front row, the one with the pink hair. Her phone was held high, steady as a surgeon's hand. Mr. Jensen, is that true? Did you breach a trademark agreement? Are you passing off frozen products from Costco as artisanal? Suddenly, all the phones in the room, all those little red record lights, swung from me to him. He was a cornered animal. The purple spotlights, meant to make him look cool, now just made the sweat on his forehead shine. This is, he stammered, his slick voice gone. This is a family matter. A simple misunderstanding. This is private. No, I said. My voice was quiet, but in the dead silence of that room, it was the only thing that mattered. It's a legal matter. And you're right about one thing, Mark. He looked at me, confused, desperate for a lifeline. Suing you over the trademark, that would be messy. It would take months. It would cost a fortune. I've already spent cleaning up the mess you made with my vendors. He seized on it. He actually puffed up, thinking he'd found a way out. Exactly. Right, so take your papers and go home. We're busy. He actually tried to shoo me with his hand. I didn't move. Oh, it's much worse than that, Mark. I let the silence in the room just press on him. The thump, thump, thump of the DJ's abandoned track was gone, and the only sound was the high-pitched whir of the new, screaming espresso machine he'd overpaid for. You see, that agreement, the junk, you didn't read. It didn't just cover the trademark for the Gilded Oven, it also covered the lease. Chloe's head, which had been bowed in shame, snapped up. Her tinfoil dress rustled. The lease? What lease? I turned to my daughter. My voice was softer now, but not kinder. It was just tired. The lease for this building, darling. You didn't think the building was just part of the hobby, did you? I looked back at Mark. His face was blank. total, absolute, dumbfounded incomprehension. "No," I said. "You've been leasing this property. From me. I personally own this building. I have since 1998. It was my husband's and my retirement plan." Mark just stared. His mouth was open. The smirk was gone. The visionary was gone. He was just a kid who'd been caught cheating on a test. "And by defaulting on the trademark license," I said, enunciating every single syllable, "by destroying the brand's reputation, by failing to pay your vendors, you have voided your lease." I watched the blood drain from his face. I watched Chloe's hand fly to her mouth, her eyes wide with a horror that was finally real. I took the last document from my folder, the one Mr. Harrison had notarized this afternoon. "This," I said, holding it up so all the phones, all the influencers, all the bloggers could see it clearly, "is a formal legal eviction notice." I stepped forward. I didn't throw it at him. I didn't slam it down. I walked to the cold metal counter, right next to a tray of his soggy, half-eaten frozen dough quiches, and I placed it, gently, on the surface. "You have 48 hours to vacate my property, all of your Ovenly equipment, all of your clutter. Get it all out." I looked at Mark. I looked at Chloe. "Get out." The words hung in the air, cold and hard as the new metal stools. The thump, thump, thump of the music was gone. The DJ had just stopped. The only sound in the entire packed room was the high-pitched, electronic whir of 20 phones, all recording. The pink-haired blogger, the one who had been filming Mark's speech, didn't move her phone. She just zoomed, first on me, then on the eviction notice I'd placed on the counter, then on Mark's face. Mark. Oh, Mark. He looked like a fish that had just been pulled out of the water. His mouth was open, moving, but no sound was coming out. The slick, visionary consultant was gone. He was just a kid, a stupid, arrogant kid who'd been caught cheating. "This is," he stammered, his voice cracking. This is a joke. She's delirious." No one laughed. No one moved. I just looked at him. I didn't need to say another word. The paper was on the counter. The phones were recording. The work was done. And then the exodus began. It wasn't a rush. It was a slow, quiet peel. The bloggers and influencers, the new clientele, they just backed away. They saw a sinking ship. They saw cringe. They saw a loser. And in their world, that was worse than being a fraud. They just vanished. Finally, it was just us and the staff. The poor, confused new baristas he'd hired, who were all looking at their shoes. I turned my head, and I looked at my daughter, Chloe. She was still standing by the ovens, a statue in a tinfoil dress. She wasn't looking at me. She wasn't looking at Mark. She was staring at the cheap, vinyl Ovenly banner, the one they'd zip-tied over my husband's sign. Mark finally found his voice. It wasn't his CEO voice. It was a high, whiny little boy voice. You can't. You bitch! You set me up." He lunged. Not at me. At the paper. He lunged for the eviction notice. I didn't even flinch. I was just tired. He snatched it. He read it. And I watched his face. It's crumple. Because he saw the signature. Not just mine. He saw the signature of Mr. Harrison, his lawyer, my lawyer, the one who had also represented him, and the one who had just witnessed his breach. He knew. It was real. He looked at Chloe. Are you just going to stand there? She's ruining us." "Chloe, my daughter." She just whispered one word. "Costco." Mark froze. "What?" "At Costco," she said, her voice a hollow whisper. You said they'd never know the difference. You promised me." Mark looked. He looked from her to me and back to her. He saw it. He saw that he'd lost. He'd lost the everything. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He threw the eviction notice on the floor. He ripped off his black Ovenly polo shirt, leaving him in a sweaty gray undershirt. He threw the polo shirt on the floor, too, and he walked out. He didn't run. He just walked. He pushed past me, not even looking at me. He just left, leaving my daughter alone in a tinfoil dress in a room full of dying purple lights and melting ice. I looked at her. "Mom," she started. I just held up my hand. 48 hours, Chloe. And I turned, and I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I left too. 48 hours later, I came back. The deadline was 5 p.m. It was 5:02. I used my old key. The back door. The one I'd used when I came to see Maria. The silence. Oh, the silence was. It was loud. It was a heavy silence. The thump, thump, thump was gone. The hissing, screaming espresso machine was gone. The bakery was empty. He'd been thorough. In a Mark kind of way, he'd taken all the new equipment, the espresso machine, the new ugly metal stools, the speakers. He'd even taken the ovenly polo shirts. But the trash. Oh, he'd left the trash. Half-eaten trays of frozen quiches were rotting on the counter. The floor was. It was sticky with stale, spilled champagne. And the walls. He'd ripped the ovenly banner off, the one that had been zip-tied over my husband's sign. He'd ripped it off so hard, he'd torn a giant, jagged strip of my buttery yellow paint off the wall with it. The wall underneath was just raw, gray drywall. A scar. It was a violation. It was the last petty little boy act of vandalism he could manage. I walked through the debris. I walked to the back, and there she was, Chloe. She was sitting on the floor, in the mop closet that used to be Maria's office. She wasn't in the tinfoil dress. She was in old, gray sweatpants, the ones she used to wear in college. Her hair was in a stringy, messy bun. She looked like a kid. She was just staring at a scuff mark on the floor. She wasn't crying. She was just empty. I stood in the doorway. She looked up. Her eyes were red, puffy. "He's gone," she said. Her voice was just a puff of air. "I know. He left last night. He emptied the Ovenly bank account. What was left of it?" "Of course he did," I said. "It wasn't an I told you so. It was just a fact." She looked down at the scuff mark. This is what you wanted, isn't it?" Her voice was trying to be angry, but it was just broken. You set us up. You wanted us to fail." I leaned against the doorframe. I was so tired. "No, Chloe," I said. My voice was soft. "I didn't want you to fail. I hoped you would pass." She looked up, confused. "Pass?" "I knew Mark was a fool," I said. "I knew he was. All hat, no cattle. I knew he was all sizzle and no steak. I knew he was cheap, but I hoped." I looked at her. "I hoped you were a baker." Her face, it just crumpled. "I hoped," I said, my voice gentle, "that the girl I raised, the girl I taught to laminate dough, the girl who knew the smell of Goldie on a spring morning, I hoped she was still in there. I hoped she would defend the work. Her voice cracked. He made me feel so small. He said your ideas, my ideas, were stupid, old-fashioned, clutter. And you believed him," I said. It wasn't a question. That's the part I don't get," I said. I wasn't angry. I was a historian, trying to figure out where the map went wrong. It was never about the bread, Chloe. Don't you see that? It was never about the money. It was about the respect. Respect for the work. I looked around the empty, trashed room. "And you didn't just let him disrespect my work. You let him disrespect yours. You let him erase you." The tears came, then. Not loud, sobbing tears. Just silent, hot, angry. Tears that just leaked out of her. "The bread," she whispered. "The sourdough. Goldie, it really was just clutter to him. He didn't get it." I looked at my daughter. My beautiful, smart, lost, broken. Daughter. And I told her the final, awful, simple truth. No, honey, I said. I took a step into the room. He didn't get it. I looked her right in the eye. But you did. You were there. You knew what it was. You knew what it meant. You knew. It was. Everything. And you let him throw it out anyway. That was the last thing I said to her. In the dark. In the grave of my bakery. And you let him throw it out anyway. Her face just crumpled. It was the soundless, ugly cry of someone who knows they're wrong. Mom. Her voice was a tiny, broken whisper. What do I do now? Mom, please, he's gone. What do I do? I looked at her, my daughter, sitting in a pile of her own, self-made debris. The mom in me, the one I thought was dead, wanted to kneel, to hold her, to say, it's okay, baby. But Eleanor knew. It's okay was the last thing she needed to hear. It's okay was what got us here. It's okay was a lie. I looked at the sticky floors, at the rotting, frozen quiches, at the giant, jagged scar of drywall on my wall. What do you do? I said. My voice wasn't hard. It wasn't angry. It was just empty. You get a mop, Chloe. You start cleaning up the mess you helped make. I walked to the back door, the one I'd come in through. You find a job, I said, my hand on the doorknob. You pay your debts. You call your father-in-law or whoever. And you grow up. Mom, please, don't leave me here. I looked back. At her. My daughter. I'm not leaving you, Chloe, I said. You let go of me. A long, long time ago. In a Costco freezer aisle. And I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it. I left her in the dark, with the mess. Because it wasn't my mess to clean up. Not anymore. Weeks later, I'm in the back, by the ovens. The thump, thump, thump is gone. The screaming espresso machine is gone. And the smell. Oh, the smell. It's back. It's the smell of home. It's the smell of 4 a.m. It's warm, yeasty, sweet. It's the smell of cardamom. Of melting butter. Of dark, dark coffee. The gray walls? They're gone. It took me 2 weeks and 3 coats of paint, but the buttery yellow is back. The sun is streaming in the front window, the window that is not covered by a vinyl banner, and the whole room. It glows. I'm not alone. Maria is standing next to me. She's terrified. I don't know, Eleanor. She's whispering. It's breathing. I laugh. A real laugh. It's supposed to be breathing, Maria. It's alive. In front of us, on the big, old, wooden prep table, the one I'd sanded down myself, is a big, stainless steel bowl. And inside is Goldie. She's bubbling. She's happy. She smells. Like ripe fruit and sweet beer. Mark had tossed Goldie. Yes. But he'd tossed the bakery's Goldie. He hadn't known. Eleanor the baker. Eleanor the baker. Always keeps a backup. He'd tossed the 20-gallon vat. He hadn't known about the 1-quart Tupperware container in the back of my home refrigerator. The mother of the mother. It's magic. Maria says, watching the starter rise. It's not magic, Maria, I say. I hand her a spatula. It's just work. It's respect. It's time. You feed it. You respect it. It gives you everything. She takes the spatula, her hand, a bookkeeper's hand, trembling a little. I'm good with numbers, Eleanor. I'm going to kill Goldie. No, you're not, I say. I put my hand over hers. You've got the touch. You're careful. You're precise. You pay attention. That's all she wants. Now, fold, gently, from the bottom. She does. She folds the new flour into the bubbling starter. And she smiles. A real, shy, I can't believe I'm doing this, smile. I did it, she whispers. You did it, I say. I walk over to the front of the shop. I look. Up. At my sign. My husband's sign. The gilded oven. It's back. The vinyl banner is gone. The zip ties are gone. The crack from when Mark had ripped the banner off. It's still there. I'd fixed it. I'd glued the oak back together. But I didn't hide the crack. I'd filled it. I'd spent 3 days with a tiny, tiny brush and a little pot of gold leaf. It's kintsugi, the Japanese art of celebrating the break, of making the scar the strongest, the most beautiful part. The crack is now a vein of pure, shining gold. It's the gilded oven, now more than ever. I hear Maria in the back, humming. I go back. I pick up an apron, a clean, crisp, white apron. I'd had it embroidered. Maria, I hold it out to her. I can't, she says, her hands covered in flour. I'm your bookkeeper. No, I say. I tie the apron around her. You were my bookkeeper. Now you're the VP of actually getting things done. I pat her on the back. Now, you're my partner. We'll make it legal next week. We'll, Mr. Harrison. We'll read the fine print. This time, together. Maria, she looks down at the embroidery. Maria, she looks up at me. Her eyes they're wet. Partner, she whispers. Partner, I say. She dries her hands on her new apron. She stands up, straighter. So, she says, her voice, not a bookkeeper's voice. It's a baker's voice. So, partner, what's first? I look at the ovens, the real ovens, the ones that are preheating. I look at the beautiful, bubbling, living Goldie. I smell the cardamom. I smell the future, and I smile. First, I say. First, we bake. And we did. We baked. We reopened the doors 3 weeks ago. No DJs, no purple lights, just the smell of real bread and a line of customers that stretched around the block. The other day, I was standing behind the counter, right under my husband's sign. I was looking at that bright, shining vein of gold, the part that used to be the scar. It's my favorite part now. I spent 30 years building a business I thought I had to give away to keep my family. I learned that you never, ever trade your power for a promise. You don't hand over your security, your life's work, and just hope someone else will respect it. You have to be your own strategist, because the finest print, the most important clause in any contract, is the one that says, respect yourself. So let me ask you, if life or even your own family tried to cover you up, to call you clutter, to tell you your work didn't matter, would you have the courage to find the fine print and reclaim what's yours? If this story resonated with you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We truly love hearing from you. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your strength in the hardest of times.